Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Cucchiara, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome in, Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you for those that are tuning in again. I appreciate it very much. For almost 11 years, we have been doing the live radio and podcasts, and we have thousands of people that download the podcast each and every month, over 10,000 on average. And I want to just always take an opportunity to thank those that follow the show, give us feedback, ideas for shows, and much, much more. So we're excited to continue that. As I mentioned before on the earlier podcast last week, we're back to at least once a week. Now that the markets are back in place, and we hope that we continue to give those information and education to really educate you on anything and everything real estate, and that is the focus. However, most of you know that if you've been following the show for years, I also do giving back segments. I have people on for nonprofits. I have people on a regular basis that really talk about what's going on in the community. I call this more of a community show in many different ways. We have done shows before that focus on what we call real estate community. And because we all live and work in the same areas, this is one big community. And so a lot of what we do here is we do giving back segments, and we allow people to come in that are, raising awareness on causes and trying to help small business and trying to help nonprofit organizations to do a lot of great stuff that we as a community could help. So with that today, I'm super, super excited about my guest. And my guest today is my daughter, Rachel Cucchiara. She is here to talk about depression, mental illness. Most of you may or may not know that the month of May is Mental Illness Awareness Month. So this is one of the reasons that she's agreed to come on, and I'm very, very proud of her. Very courageous and inspiring, and I'm sure you will find the same as we go through this conversation and this interview. So with that, I will welcome Rachel in. Rachel, how are you doing today?
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Good
I
to have you.
I know you've asked me quite a few times to be here, so here I am. So I guess a little bit about me. I grew up in San Jose, born and raised San Jose. Went to Valley Christian High School, junior high and high school. Was really active in sports and the dance program there. And still here. Still, I work full time in an orthodontic office, and I'm just passionate about mental illness and mental health awareness and anything having to do with that. So that's why I'm here, and I'm really grateful for, you having this for Mental Health Awareness Month. And I'm passionate about it because I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder when I was 14, and then anxiety disorder a couple years after that. So it's been about 13 years now since my diagnosis, and I struggle with both of those, both depression and anxiety, but depression has always been the more difficult one for me. So that's what I will mostly be talking about today, but I'll kind of be touching on both of those. So
great. Well, thanks for the background, Rachel. Yeah, and again, I can't say enough about how how encouraging this is and inspiring it is. And I know for a fact, not just because it's my daughter, not just because I see it all the time, I hear it all the time. A lot of people are still afraid and apprehensive to talk about mental illness, and Rachel's going to get into that as well. So we welcome her in here, and we look forward to really getting this information out in an effort to share their awareness for everyone. And that's what Rachel's been doing for several years. So thanks for the background, Rachel. Share us a little bit about some of the real challenges, just kind of to give us started. What types of real day-to-day challenges do people face with mental illnesses, and then bring them, to your personal experience as well?
Yeah, this question I can actually spend a lot of time on, but because there are so many, unfortunately, but I'm going to narrow it down to one of the biggest ones that I would definitely say would be finding. One of the biggest challenges would be finding the right treatment for oneself and getting the help that we need is a definite challenge. Finding the right therapist, finding the right medication. Do I even need medication? needing to wait weeks for that medication to kick in to even see if that's the right one for you. And it's like, if those things don't work, what other kind of treatment can I try? What works for me? What should I try, etc. So there's just so much that goes into it, and everyone's so different, and it's not kind of like a one size fits all. And on top of that, the healthcare system still doesn't quite know how to properly treat people with mental illness or how to handle people with mental illness, which kind of adds to the challenging part of that. I feel like there's so much work that needs to be done and so much more training that needs to happen in the hospitals and the health systems so that people with mental illness who are in crisis can get the help that they so desperately need and deserve. Like, for a personal example, there have been times where I've gone to the hospital or to the doctor and to kind of tell them where I'm at and tell them, hey, I kind of need help. Like, where can I go from here? Can you guys help me get the help I need? And normally the response is like, okay, it's a 3-month wait for you to see the psychiatrist. We'll see you in 3 months. And if you need us and it's an emergency, like, give us a call. And I'm like, no, that's why I'm here. I need the help right now. And so I feel for those people who don't come and get the help, because I'm just like nervous that so many other people either have had that same experience or go and they reach out for help and they don't really get what they are wanting from the healthcare system. And I'm, nervous for what happens to people and what has happened to people who don't get the help they need. And so, I guess other options are, they'll say other options are, oh, you can either be admitted to the psychiatric unit or they send you away for a couple months and you got to wait to talk to some people or get on medication or whatever you need. It's like, I don't know. I think a frustrating part is I feel like there needs to be some sort of middle ground instead of those two,
Right.
two options. But so it's frustrating, and I feel like there needs to be a lot of work around that. And at the same time, I just want to say, if you are, after I said all of that, like, even if you are struggling, it is important and worth it to keep trying things in order to figure out what's best for you and for what works, even, despite all the frustrating parts of the system.
Right. Well, that's great. And I think there's a couple things you touched on that I really want to make sure I highlight, Rach. Number one, there's really two good points here that I took out of here. Number one, when you mentioned trying different drugs and different therapies and things, I know some people right out of the gate, Rachel, are apprehensive and they're not sure, and it kind of scares them about drugs, and they hear, rumors and ins and outs. What would you say to the people that are first dealing with this firsthand, and in the conversation comes up with what the therapist and it says, hey, listen, we'd like to think one of the things we'd like to do is try some different drugs or some different treatments. What would you say to the people that are listening to this or out there and apprehensive, and also not only some of the young children, because when you're adult, you can make that own decision, but in how that relates to their parents' reaction or how they handle that?
Yeah, I am definitely going to get into that a little bit later as well,
Okay.
because that all touches on part of the stigma, because I feel like a lot of time, and even myself, I was very apprehensive at first to take medication because a lot of different reasons. It's like, the stigma of, why should I even need medication? And then a lot of times I know when people struggle, they're like, I don't want to need medication in order to feel better.
Right.
And they don't want to, rely on it and depend on it. But I think I would say, medication is not for everybody, but it is a helpful resource. And I would say to those who are considering it, or maybe their doctor suggested, just to be open and maybe try, one or and see how it goes, because you never know, that could be something that is life-changing for you. So
yeah, very good. Thank you. One of the things that there's so much good stuff here, and we're going to fill in as much as we can with the time we have. And as I do this, I'd really love to have you back in the next couple of months too. But, let's get as much done as we can today. Why do you think it's so difficult, Rachel, for many people to be honest and open and candid about the struggles, the depression and mental illness initially when they find out? Share with us, your thoughts on that.
I mean, yeah, point blank, the stigma. This is kind of where it comes in. And unfortunately, the stigma is a huge issue for a lot of different things around it. But I mean, society makes it known and okay, like so okay to talk about any physical illness. But when it comes to mental illness, it's like, no, that's not okay to talk about. And that needs to be broken down, because that is just not okay. An illness is an illness, whether it's physical or mental. And I think another reason it can be hard for people who are struggling to be open and talk about it is that when you struggle with depression and anxiety, with that illness comes lies that it tells you. And some of those lies are that you're a burden, or that no one cares, or that you're not going to be able to get better, and all these different things that can get in the way of people actually asking for help, because those lies can be so strong and believable. So unfortunately, that's another reason I think that people can just be like, you know what, I'm just going to try to deal with this and not talk about anybody, because I don't want to be a burden. I don't want people to, feel bad for me. And I don't know what people are going to think when I say this, and just stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I know you touched on some of the treatments and drugs and how, people should be open-minded and maybe look at different things, but maybe you could take us through a variety of, I know you've experienced some things personally, you know a lot of people, you work with some younger children as well. Maybe just give us an example of some other treatments that you either aware of or used yourself, or you could share with the audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've tried quite a few. So I think my biggest one is therapy. I go to therapy weekly still, which has been life-saving for me. I've been going to therapy since I was 14, since my original diagnosis, and I've seen a handful of different therapists since then. And you just you got to find the right one, and it can take time, but finding the right one is so crucial, very, very crucial. So therapy, I've tried a handful, many medications on and off. I'm actually still trying to kind of find the right one that works for me, and that's another thing, you got to find the right medication, and then you also got to find the right dose on top of it. So there's a lot that goes into it, and I'm in that boat right now. Just kind of, I was off meds for a while, just kind of trying other treatments and stuff like that. Now I'm kind of back on trying to see what works for me. And so I'm in that, and I've done TMS, which stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's a newer treatment for depression. And when I did that a couple years ago for the first time, it was actually life-changing for me. I noticed a big difference in my energy actually first in the first week or so of the treatment. It's a commitment, as most things that people try, but yeah, if you're willing and wanting to try to get the help that you need, I recommend looking into that. That was a good one. And then I've also done things like I was in Illinois for a month in a treatment center, just getting the 24/7 every day, every hour, therapy and support groups and tools. And sometimes you need that when you're in a place where you just kind of need a reset, and you need to be in an environment like that just constantly. And so there's that. And then I've done both inpatient and outpatient hospitalization programs. So yeah, I've tried quite a few things, and I'm grateful for all of them. I am. So
you speak to all of them, and it's one of the benefits they have. And before we kind of continue the conversation with Rachel, one of the things I want to point out to the listeners, the people that are downloading the podcast and listening to this podcast, I would really encourage you to please, maybe this doesn't apply to you, maybe it doesn't apply to your family or friends, or you might have a coworker, someone you know, someone you love, a neighbor. It doesn't really matter. Share this with them. What you're going to find out, if you haven't experienced yet, you're hearing it from Rachel. And I could tell you by attending conferences and educating myself as much as I did as well over the past several years, is that a lot of people are afraid to even have this conversation. And we have to, put a stop to that. It has to, as Rachel mentioned, it has to really be an open dialogue and conversation about what people are really struggling with. So please, again, share this, and we'll remind everybody as the podcast goes along. Rachel, what about, speaking of that, someone that's listening to this podcast or they're sharing with someone, and maybe they're just realizing they're experiencing depression, or what appears to be depression, or they don't really know, maybe talk a little bit about, I know it's easy for some people to say, and this is one of the things you're really good at, well, just tell someone or just be honest with someone. Well, it's not that easy sometimes. So share with us maybe some ideas for someone that's just finding out now, and they're afraid to tell their parents, or maybe their teacher or their coach or people who love them, or, what would you suggest in a situation like that?
Yeah. Three things. I think the first one would be to know that, if you're experiencing this, or you have just gotten your diagnosis, or you think you might be struggling with it or anything like that, know you are not alone, because that is something that I wish I would have known when I first got my diagnosis, because it is easy to feel like you're alone in it. And I think part of that is because it's not talked about much, but like I think it's a 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people struggle with mental illness. Like, it's all around us and every day, and we have no idea who is struggling with it. But you aren't alone. I know it feels like you are, but you're not. And I think the second thing would be to find, the support that you need. Find a therapist, find a support group, and it's also important to create a support system of people that you trust that can walk with you in this journey, because that's going to be very important. It's very important that you do not try to fight this alone. And I think lastly would be that I will just say that there is hope and that there is help, because I think people need to hear that in the beginning, because it's easy to not think that that is true. So even in the darkest times, I promise you that there are better days ahead, and I promise you it is possible to feel better and possible to find things that will help you. So.
Yeah, very good. Well said. After I would hope that as a society, we're more educated about this, it's more aware. Social media, there's a lot of different ways that people are become more educated in the awareness of mental illness, but I agree with you. I think there's still a stigma, unfortunately. That being said, do you think we seem to be hearing a lot more, and again, it could be because of the mediums now with social media and where everybody is, getting barraged with information daily. So do you think there's just an appearance that there seems to be more young children experiencing or having issues with anxiety, mental illness, or is it just maybe that we're more aware now, so people are more bold and honest about speaking up? That's kind of I don't know, how do you feel about that? What is your thought and philosophy or?
Yeah, it could be a little bit of both. Yeah, definitely. We are now, I think, a little bit more aware. People are more aware of the things going on. It's hard because there are also circumstantial and environmental reasons why people struggle with mental illness, as well as the chemical aspect. So it depends. It goes from person to person on, is this chemical? Is this environmental? Is it both? And so I think that is one thing. And the lack of the understanding behind the illness, I think, is a factor as well, to where I think a lot more kids could be helped and treated early if there was more of an understanding about it. A lot of kids may struggle and bring it up to their parents or teachers or whoever, and they may, those people may deny it because they don't want to accept it. And but that doesn't help the kids get better. And I think another thing would be researching, like we can all research warning signs and symptoms that come with mental illness, so that we can all be more aware, and that maybe that could be helpful, that adults or anybody can notice these things in kids or any of our loved ones, so that these things don't go untreated. That's how, we can do our part as well. But I think there are so many different aspects, like social media, there's bullying, there's abuse, there's, toxic households. There's so many different things that can play a part into mental illness. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think also that, of course you grew up and went to school, and there was demands, and there's all kinds of different things, and you have social media now. You made some good points there. I wonder if too, what your thought is on just the additional pressure. And I know there's additional pressure on girls, how you look and what you're supposed to look like, and the pressure on kids to get A's and be prepared for a college education. And, if you don't get those grades, do you think there's some correlation with the stress and the pressure on young children that actually contribute to some of these challenges?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's everybody's case, but I definitely think that that's a big, issue. And for me, and even still to this day, I struggle with comparison, and with social media. Sometimes even I have to take a break, and it's just everywhere. You're comparing yourself to other people's lives or their relationships or their body types and what they have succeeded in, and like, why can't I succeed it? And there's just like, I feel like constant comparisons, and like it can lead to feeling like having people feel like they're not good enough when they see all these things. And I think that's why it's important to share things, not only with people, but on social media, of like reality. Not everything on social media is reality. And it's important to share the good things, but I think it's also important to share the not so good things so that people can see that, that's life. It's both.
Yeah.
And you would, things like people check into Facebook on when they're at the doctor's or the hospital getting a surgery, whatever. But do you ever see people checking in on Facebook when they're at their therapy appointment or getting their psychiatry appointment? Not really.
Good point.
Because that would be weird for people, but in reality, it's not weird. So just things like that kind of help,
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And we're going to talk about that now. The stigma, you mentioned it earlier, Rachel, the stigma it's still there. It still exists. I know maybe we're doing a little bit better, but you do make a good point that, you see on Facebook and social media, hey, I'm going in for knee surgery, or I just came out of my heart attack and it was successful. And this, but you don't see someone, or you very rarely see someone posting pictures saying, I just had a rough week and I had to go check myself in, or,
right.
I found myself a new therapist, but you do make a good point about that. And that brings us to the stigma conversation. And maybe we could spend a few minutes on that. I think we all would agree it exists. Hopefully it's getting better, but give us some examples. I remember when we went to the conference, some of the testimonials were super powerful, and maybe share with the audience a little bit about what you learned from that and some of the examples of that people gave of stigmas. And maybe again, these types of things with someone being so honest and candid yourself will help, someone as they're listening to this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, there's 100% still a stigma going on. I will say it has gotten a lot better over the years. I think people are talking about it a lot more, but there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think one of the reasons there is still a stigma is because we believe what we see, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, mental illness is known. Another word for it is the invisible illness. And so we aren't walking around with casts on, and we aren't walking around, quote unquote, looking like we are in pain, but we are. And I think it's hard for, people to believe what they don't see. And I don't remember where or who I heard this from, but I remember hearing something a while ago. Someone said, and I'm going to butcher it, not word for word, but something like society is so accepting of any part of our body needing help or treatment except for the brain.
Wow.
And it's so true. Like, you need surgery, that's great. You need treatment for cancer, absolutely, do it. You have a mental illness, you need to see a psychiatrist. Are you sure? Like, are you sure you need to do that?
I know.
Like, why are we okay with people taking insulin for diabetes, but not okay with people taking medication for mental illness? Like, we need to be okay with both of those things.
I mean, that is so powerful, Rachel. Thank you for sharing that. That is so well said. Do you remember the story? And I'd love to have you just tell it real quick. When we were at the conference, they gave examples of, the kinds of things neighbors and loved ones would automatically do for someone that had a heart attack or a stroke or cancer. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? That was impactful for me. Tell a little bit about something. And I think that was an eye opener for people too, how people respond. And you just kind of touched on it. So maybe if you could elaborate how they respond, not only emotionally, but physically, in ready to help people with other illnesses versus mental illnesses.
Yeah. I think it's funny you asked that question, because the answer to that question about to that seminar we were at is actually kind of leading into the next question about,
okay.
But I can, I am not 100% sure I know what you're talking about, but are you talking about the no casserole illness?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
thank you. Yes.
Yeah, no. And I love that. That's something that has stuck with me, because it's so true. Like, they call mental illness the no casserole illness, because, when people are in surgery or get any sort of like procedure done, people are so quick to, oh, like, what can I bring you food? Can I bring you dinner? What can I do to help? And people wouldn't, that's not a normal thought that comes to offering people help that struggle with mental illness. Like, but we also will appreciate that just as much as someone going through the surgery or anything like that.
Yeah, no, that was great. I mean, there were some great examples, and that's part of the education that we can't really underestimate. You can't underscore enough that as those that are listening to this podcast, please, please, please take it from people who have lived it and understand it. And Rachel's certainly giving you some great examples, but you can never learn enough and read enough and inquire enough about how you could help your loved ones. And, speaking of that, Rachel, again, we touched on it before, but I think it's really important. Strategies maybe to discussing mental illness and different types with loved ones, whether it's parents or teachers, coaches, relatives. Any suggestions on how to best communicate? I guess what I mean is maybe some examples of, I know you've worked with, not only you've got a lot of work yourself, but you've worked with young girls and about struggles with this, and you've educated yourself, and you've also were nominated to, which we'll talk a little bit about later, but I know you were nominated to as a contestant to write a book, and you got narrowed down all the way to the top 10 or 15, and that was quite an accomplishment on your studies in mental illness and specifically depression, which was quite impressive. So the reason I bring that up is I know you've spent a lot of time researching and studying and living this. Share some examples of real things that, someone listening again today, because it's so important. What types of things, how would they approach their parents? I know it sounds crazy, or I know it sounds like, well, they've just approached their parents, Joe. Well, it's not that easy, and Rachel could share with you. So maybe some ideas or thoughts or words, or maybe the way you might articulate approaching someone so that you have a better chance of them embracing and listening to you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is difficult, especially when it's your first time kind of speaking up and voicing, like that kind of makes it more real, like voicing this is what's going on. And it's terrifying because you don't know what people's response is going to be. And I think, something for me, and this isn't what works for everybody, but if one idea is if you're kind of terrified to speak in person to somebody about what's going on, you can always write a letter. You can write a letter so that I love writing letters, especially when I need to, get all my thoughts out, because you can put it all on paper and then you can word it how you want to. If you're nervous about how, like, what's going to come out, if you're going to be able to even say it in person, one good recommendation would be to kind of write a letter and give that to the person and be like, this is what's going on. In that letter, you can say, what you're feeling or what your diagnosis is or what you think is going on. And then also saying how you would like that person to support you too. Because a lot of people don't know how to support, or they support in a way that you don't want help that way, or you don't need that sort of support. So I think a helpful thing would be to tell them, this is what I need from you. This is how you can help me, and just kind of speak for what you need. I say this like it's easy, and it's not, but that's just that's one way that you can go about that.
Okay, great. We talked about the book that you were working on. I know you're a writer. You love to write. You're very good at it. You do blogs. I know hundreds of people that comment on the stuff that you post. I can't tell you how many times, and it's not just me, and please know that just because I'm her father, and I'm not saying this is real, if you follow Rachel, the hundreds and hundreds of people that are encouraged by and inspired by what Rachel writes and what she posts, and how you hear all the time, boy, I was afraid to talk about this, or, you're inspiring because you're honest about it. And now I feel like there's someone that I could, reference, and all those types of things. What kinds of things are you working on right now, Rachel? What is your kind of your goals and what you want to do over the next several years with this? I mean, obviously helping people, but kind of what ways you want to do that and how you're going to go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I will always will continue to spread awareness on social media, and just by sharing my story, on social media or with people who I talk to, like whenever chance I get, because I think that's really important. And the more you hear people share their story, the more it becomes like a normal reality for people, and it becomes more normal. And you hear someone else's story and then you want to share yours. Oh, I'm actually experiencing the same thing. So it's helpful when you hear other people's stories. So I will continue to share my story on social media and being vulnerable. And yes, I am writing a book. I am not halfway done with it yet, but I'm very excited about it. I've been writing it for a while now, putting it off and on, but it's something that I've always wanted to do. And it's going to be, me sharing my story, talking about a lot about the vulnerable and some of the taboo mental health topics that aren't talked about a lot, such as suicide and self-harm and stuff like that, that are very real and important to talk about, and just sharing things that I've learned that help me, but most of all, just wanting people to hear this so that they know that they're not alone and that there is hope to move forward day by day while living with depression.
That's great. We're going to, in a couple of minutes, we're going to let people know how to reach Rachel if you want any feedback or thoughts. But one of the things that I did want to throw out there, and I don't want to speak out of turn, so I'll let Rachel respond, is that, if you're listening to this podcast again, and maybe it doesn't affect you personally, but someone you care about, you love, that are close to, that you want to share it to, please be brave enough to share it, number one. And number two, I can't speak for Rachel, but, for schools, for organizations, for businesses, there's all kinds of people that could use this type of help and this type of guidance and this type of really testimony and reality. And it's great that doctors show up, don't get me wrong, and therapists, because we need those too. But I'll tell you what we need. We need more people like Rachel, who has not only lived it, but experienced it, now has decided to passionately give this back and help as many people as they can. So the reason I bring this up is, think about contacting her. Maybe you want her to come and speak at a school, a sports event, a small business, or a business, or anything, an organization, a church. I could go on and on. And I know she's probably going to be mad at me for saying this, because she's bashful sometimes with this, and I'm going to promote her myself here, so I don't want to speak for her. But I do mean this. Whoever it is, someone that's lived it, that's real about it, and that's willing to talk to from their heart. And even more importantly, I'll say someone that's age appropriate. It's better coming from someone like Rachel for young children than it is someone like me or other people as an example that are older, I just feel. So after I went on, Rachel, what do you think about that? Are you willing to do that?
I was holding my breath listening to you say that because
I overstepped my boundaries here.
You know how long it took to get me here to speak just in front of a microphone.
Yes.
But I'm working on it. I'm working on my fears of that. So maybe one day. But if you don't mind, can I touch on one thing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You were asking me earlier about just other things that people and loved ones can do in supporting of those struggling. And I think one big thing is when someone does share that with you and when they're vulnerable and open, like, please believe them when they tell you, even if you don't want to believe them. It's very important to them that you do. And know that we're not doing this for attention. A lot of people can say, oh, they're reaching out because they want attention. They're crying because they want attention. They're not actually going to hurt themselves. Like, no, that's not true. And it's really not our job to decide what that person is feeling, and what they tell us that they're feeling is real, and they're dealing with the real illness and real pain, and know that it's not something that we can just get over. It's going to take time and patience. And it's important that you just be there for them and let them know that you're going to fight this with them. And I think like more tangible ways of helping people with depression, we often struggle a lot with a lack of motivation, even doing simple daily things that people do, like getting out of bed, cleaning, taking a shower, making food, like stuff like that can be hard for people who struggle with depression, because it's hard for them to get that motivation. And so if you're looking for a more tangible way to help somebody struggling, a really good one would be something like we were talking about earlier, like the no casserole illness, like bring them a meal, make them a meal. Okay. Like that is going to be so helpful, because that is one less thing for them to think about and like have to muster up the energy to do. And you have no idea how much that that is helpful for someone who struggles with the lack of motivation. So bringing them a meal or offering to help clean their house or tidy up their room, or even, hey, can I take your car to get it washed, or stuff like that. Just little things that you might not even think about are going to make a big difference, but they are. And even like sending texts and just reminding them like, hey, I'm thinking of you. Hey, like, let me know if you need anything. I love you. I care about you. Because again, like I said earlier, the constant lies that we're being fed in our head of, no one cares. I'm a burden. Like, I'm not going to reach out, like stuff like that. It's very helpful when you get a text of, that someone says, hey, I care for you, or I'm here for you, and stuff like that. So yeah, I just wanted to add to that.
No, that's great. I mean, it's a great way to kind of sum things up as we wrap up the show. And I just, this is so important. Rachel shared, she took you through a journey, not only her own personal journey, but a lot of the suggestions you have. And I would just say it's real. What I would like to add, it's real. And believe people, as Rachel mentioned. Talk to them, believe them, check in with them. And no different than most of us are quick to spend money on vacations and, houses and cars and coaching and business coaching and all these different things we spend money on. But it is odd still that anytime, therapy comes up or mental illness, people kind of shy away and back off and go, well, I don't know. I'm not sure if I really could do that or should do that. I want to do that, when, again, just do what you can to support those that you love, and reach out and keep your eyes open for people that need your care. And Rachel's very, very good at that, and she demonstrated that today. So Rachel, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your wisdom. You inspire a lot of people, I know, and you'll continue to do that. For those that may want to reach out to you and, get your feedback or have you speak somewhere, or just really pick your brain and reach out or help, how would they to reach you?
Yeah. I love when people reach out to me and ask questions or, want to talk. So please do. I'm active on Instagram and Facebook, so feel free to send me a message there. Just my first and last name, Rachel Cucchiara. And then if you don't have social media, or don't want to go about social media, you can also email me. My email is same thing, rachelcucchiara0@gmail.com. And I promise to get back to any messages as soon as I can. But please reach out if you need to talk or have any questions.
Great. Rachel, thank you again for your time. And again, I can't say enough about the inspiration, the kindness, from your heart that you share every day, and you live it. You're a role model for sure for any age for that matter, but specifically younger children. Be sure to reach out, and if Rachel could help you at all. So if you don't mind, maybe we'll have you back in a couple of months for an update and see how things are going. Especially, I would like to actually have you back as we come out of the pandemic, to find out maybe what happened during the pandemic and how it may affect the mental illness, and then maybe to help us along with that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thanks, Rachel. Take care.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for all the great work. This is Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you again for tuning in. For more information, you can go to RERL-1754.com. That is RERL-1754.com, and be sure to share this beautiful message with everybody you care about. Thank you, and have a great afternoon. Take care.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.